Masechet Sanhedrin Daf Nun He. Tenor Banan. Zachur lo asu bo katan kegadol. Behema asu ba ketana kegadola. Baraita teaches that when it comes to mishkav zachur, homosexual relations, the Torah does not equate a young boy with an older boy. We'll see exactly what that means. Whereas for bestiality, the Torah does equate a young animal and an old animal. So the second part is pretty clear, that if one commits bestiality, it doesn't matter if the animal is old or young. The person who does it and the animal both get capital punishment. So it does no age, the age doesn't matter there. But the first one is not clear. Mai lo asu bo katan kegadol. Amar Rav lo asu biat pachot miben tesha shanim keben tesha shanim. Ushmuel amar lo asu biat pachot miben shalosh shanim keben shalosh shanim. So there's two opinions about how to interpret this clause in the Baraita. Rav says it means the Torah does not equate a boy who's under 9 years old like a boy who is over 9 years old. What does this mean? This means that if a boy is the recipient, you have an adult who's the active partner with a boy, so a boy who's not less than 13 years old will not get punished. So there's no capital punishment for the boy. We're not talking about that. Rather, we're talking about the adult. And Rav is saying that an act is called a sexual act only if a boy is over 9 years old. And so therefore, if an adult has relations with a boy over 9 years old, that is considered a sexual act, and therefore violates the prohibition, and the adult will get capital punishment. However, if the boy is less than 9 years old, he's not yet developed to a point that he can perform a legally recognized sexual act. And so the adult would not get capital punishment. So we have to understand here that getting punishment or not is not necessarily the same as being morally okay or not morally okay, right? There are cases like this where if the boy recipient is less than 9 years old, so it's not considered officially, legally a sexual act, and therefore we cannot give capital punishment to the adult. This doesn't mean it's okay. It's still a terrible, morally reprehensible act, but on a technicality, it's not defined as a sexual act, and therefore it cannot be given capital punishment. All right, that's the opinion of Rav. Shmuel, however, says no. The cutoff point is actually 3 years old. We'll see the sources for this. And so therefore, again, if an adult male has relations with a child boy, and the child is above 3 years old, that is considered a sexual act, and therefore the adult is killed, the child, nothing happens to them. And if the child is less than 3 years old, then it's just not considered a sexual act with a boy who's less than 3 years old. And so, again, as bad as it is, there is no capital punishment for the adult. B'mai kami palge. What's at the root of their machloket? Rav savar kol di'iteh b'shochev iteh b'nishkab v'chol de'leteh b'shochev leteh b'nishkab. Rav says any boy who can perform a sexual act as an active partner also can as a passive partner. But if they cannot do so as an active partner, they cannot do so as a passive partner. And so therefore, the rabbis say that a boy, once he reaches the age of 9 years old and above, already he can engage physically in a physical act, in a sexual act. He's already developed enough to do so as an active partner. And therefore, if he's the passive partner when he's like 10 or 11 in Mishkav Zachur, although the boy will not get punished because he's not yet 13, it is still considered a legally recognized sexual act, and the adult will be killed. However, if the boy is less than 9 years old, then he's not physically mature enough to perform a sexual act as the active partner, and therefore it's not considered as the passive partner either to be a sexual act, and therefore the adult who's with a 7-year-old will not get capital punishment. Ushmuel sabar mishkeve isha ketiv. Shmuel says, well, the pasuk regarding Mishkav Zachur says, a man cannot be with another man as one lies with a woman. It compares a man to a woman. Now, regarding a woman, so what's the cutoff time for a woman when something is considered an act or not? That is 3 years old. So if someone does a forbidden act with a 2-year-old, Again, these are all theoretical cases. Rabbis weren't actually thinking about cases that would actually happen. Hopefully not, but again, it's only in a theoretical sense, the same way they talk about lots of other issues that hopefully don't come up. So anyway, if a girl is less than 3 years old, any act that's done to her is not considered a sexual act, and therefore would not be punished as such. But over 3 years old, then it is considered a sexual act. That is true for a girl, and since the pasuk makes reference to relations with a woman in the pasuk and compares it to mishkav zachur, therefore Shmuel says we define it the same way. And so if a boy is 4 or 5 years old and he's the passive partner, the adult will get killed who is with him. And if the boy is 2 years old, then the adult will not get capital punishment because the cutoff time is 3 years old. Tanya kivateh derav. זכר בן 9 שנים ויום אחד הבא לבהמה בין כדרכה בין שלא כדרכה והאישה מביאה את הבהמה עליה בין כדרכה בין שלא כדרכה חייב. There's a braita that supports it have, because this braita says that if a boy is 9 years old and 1 day, so 9 and 1 day or older, and he is the active partner in committing bestiality with an animal, whether kedarka shelo kedarka, we'll define it once, and then we'll use euphemisms. Kedarka is vaginal intercourse. Shelo kedarka, literally not the normal way, is anal intercourse. And so if this boy, 10 years old, 11 years old, or above, anything above that, has relations with an animal, whether in the normal way or the abnormal way, then it will be chayav. In this case, if the boy is only 9 or 10 or 11, 12, the boy will not be punished because he's less than bar mitzvah. But the animal will be killed. If it's an adult, then both the animal and the adult will be killed. And so we're learning a number of things from here. Number one, that the cutoff time for a boy is 9 years old. That's the part that proves what we had before. We also learned that bestiality is both the normal and abnormal way. And the next case is Haisha mebi'at behema aleha, if a woman is a passive partner in bestiality, ben kedarka ben shelo kedarka chayav, whether the animal is penetrating her in the normal way or the abnormal way, again, the animal will be killed, and the woman, if she's bat mitzvah, will also be killed. Okay, so that the beginning of this supports Rav. Darash Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda be'isha shene mishkabot ubehema mishkab echad. Now that we brought up this topic of how many orifices are prohibited, Rav Nachman, the son of Rav Chisda, says regarding a woman, there's 2 ways to lie with a woman, and so anybody from front or back, normal or abnormal way, that is considered a sexual act. And if it's a prohibited relation, then they will be punished. Whereas for an animal, there's only one way to lie in a prohibited way with an animal. That is the normal way. It's not normal because it's with an animal, but we mean is from the vaginal intercourse, and so from the abnormal would not be punishable even with an animal. So again, try to think of these things theoretically. We're just like trying to fit categories and figure out where they belong. Matkif larav papa adraba isha deorhahi amishka michayav midam acharina la michayav. Rav Papa rejects Rav Nachman and says it makes more sense to say the opposite regarding a woman, where relations with a woman is a normal thing to do. It's permitted in some cases. And so there it makes sense to say that mishkab michayav, lying with a woman in a normal way, is what would be prohibited if it was a prohibited relation. But for anything else, for abnormal, shelo kedarka, or anything else, one would not be liable. So it's only considered a sexual act with a woman if it's vaginal. That's it. Whereas for an animal, behema delav orhahi lechayev ala al kol nekev v'nekev. Whereas relations with an animal, which is not normal, so there we should be more stringent, and one should be liable for any orifice if one has bestiality, right, with an animal. Kedarka shelo kedarka, it shouldn't matter. So Rav Papa is actually saying the opposite of Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says for a woman there's 2 ways, but animal 1 way. Rav Papa says no, it should be the opposite. For a woman there's the normal way. Okay, so since there's a normal way, that's what's called a sexual act, just from the front. front. Whereas for an animal where everything is abnormal, so then you should include everything, and that should be more stringent. Tanya de la Ketarbayo. Now we have two opinions. We bring a braita that actually doesn't agree with either of these opinions. It's half like this and half like that, which is like none of them. Zachar ben tesha shanim v'yom echad. This is actually the braita that we saw right above, that we used to prove, to support Rav, of the 9-year-old cutoff time. So if a boy 9 years old or older, habala behemai ben kedarka ben shelo kedarka, so we see regarding animals, we include both orifices. That is like Rav Papa. And then it says, Vayisha mibiyat behema aleha ben kedarka ben shelo kedarka chayav. And then it says regarding a woman, as the passive partner of bestiality is prohibited and liable in both orifices. Well, that is like Rav Nachman. So he said that this braita includes both kedarka and shelo kedarka for a woman and also an animal. So that is like neither. It's more stringent than both of them. New question: what if someone doesn't have full sexual intercourse, but rather me'areh means only the beginning of it, only if the male member touches or slightly is inserted into the female, but not fully inserted. And when is that considered prohibited and punishable? So if it's any prohibited relation, incest, adultery, bestiality, whatever it is, and it's not fully inserted, but only a little bit or only touches, would that get capital punishment? Okay, that's the question. The question is regarding Mishkav Zachur. So we ask, you're asking about Mishkav Zachur, and this question, Mishke be isha ketibe, ela me'areh b'bhemahu. Well, we already said regarding Mishkav Zachur, it compares it to lying with a woman. And regarding lying with a woman, we know that, yes, it is considered an act. And we know this from the pasuk regarding Nida that says, Ve'ish asher yishkab et isha dava v'gilat et vata mekora he'aira. So if man lies with a woman during her menstruation, he can cover nakedness. Ha'ira. So it says the word ha'ira, and so this is a reference to the initial act. Note, it's going to come up in a second, that it also says regarding an aunt, Edvat achot imecha, a mother sister and a father sister, lo tegel kishero ha'ira avonam isa'u. So it also says the word ha'ira regarding a mother sister. But the main thing that we're learning it from is from a nida, and since it says ha'ira here, so we know that that's true for this case and other relations between man and woman, that ha'me'areh is considered a sexual act and therefore would be liable if the relationship is prohibited. So that we know, and that's already compared to Mishkav Zachur, so we know that too. So rather, if you're going to ask a question, the question we don't know is, what about the beginning of the act regarding bestiality? Is that prohibited, or does it have to be a full act of insertion? Amar le, im eno inyan ha'ara'a dichtiba gabe achot abi v'achot imo de la sericha da'it kash lahara'a denida teneu inyan ha'ara'a debhema. And the answer is yes, it's prohibited, and the source is from the two pisukim that we just quoted. You see that it said the word ha'ira regarding an aunt, father's sister or mother's sister, and we don't need it to say it in that pasuk, because it's already said in Nida. And we already compared Nida and used that as the source for other human relations that the initial act is considered prohibited. So we already know that from Nida, and that from that we can learn to ant. So therefore we don't need that pasuk. So if it's not relevant to these cases of prohibited relations between a man and a woman, and we also don't need it for Mishkav Zachur because it's already compared to lying the way one lies with a woman, so we have an extra pasuk. You know what? We'll use it for bestiality. That also one gets capital punishment even just for the initial act. Okay, we accept that, but we have a question. The prohibition of bestiality is punishable by court. The court kills the person. But these pisukim that we just quoted regarding an ant and nida, the punishment is less. It's only karet. And so, why does the Torah choose to put this extra word regarding an isur karet when it should apply to an isur mitat betin? Instead, how come the Torah doesn't put this extra word regarding a case that is mitat betin, and then I can learn from there to all the other cases of mitat betin, that even an initial act is considered a full, like the same as a full act, and is liable. So that's the question. I understand it's an extra pasuk, but why does the Torah choose to put this extra pasuk in an isur karet, which is lower, rather than put it regarding in the pasuk of bestiality itself or some other case that is punishable by a court, so that way I can learn it in an easier way? And the answer is, the answer is actually this entire pasuk is extra because we know that the case of incest with an ant is prohibited from another pasuk in Vayikra 18. This one is in Vayikra 20. And so this is the whole pasuk is extra to learn extra things from, right? And we'll learn lots of extra things from this. So we put this word here also because it's going to be something that we learn an extra law from. And this, in this case, happens to be that we're learning it from. We're learning from here to a case of bestiality, but this is a good place for it because everything here is extra. So we put all the extra words here, and we'll use this to derive lots of other laws. And now a pretty unusual question. Rav Achdeboy bar Ameh asks Rav Sheshat, what if someone does an initial act of insertion on himself, meaning he takes his own male member and tries to wrap it through his legs and insert it into his own backside? What is the law regarding that? Would that be considered a homosexual act, mishkav zachur, punishable or not? And so Rav Sheshat says, you disgust me, which is an appropriate answer for such a question. Like, what are you talking about? And then we have a follow-up answer. Amar Rav Asher, ma'iti ba'ilach, what exactly are you asking? Bekoshi lamashkachata, if his male member is erect, it's impossible, because then you wouldn't be able to wrap it down through his legs. So that's just an impossible situation. Don't bother asking about that. Ki mashkachata be'mishamesh met. But it is maybe is possible if his member is flaccid. So then, he actually is taking the question seriously. So what would be the case? What would be the law? Well, this depends on a different machloket. If someone has relations with illicit relations, like with incest or something, but with a flaccid member, if you say that such a thing is exempt, that's not considered a sexual act, then here also, because it's not erect, it's not considered a sexual act, and therefore he would not be liable. However, there is another opinion there that says, according to the opinion that says, if a man is with a woman he's not allowed to be with, even though he's not erect, and one is liable just for touching there, and one would be liable for capital punishment if it's on purpose, or a korban if it's bishogeg. According to that opinion, well, in this case, even though his member is flaccid, nevertheless, it is considered a sexual act, and therefore he would be liable not once, but actually twice. He would be liable as the active partner and as the passive partner, all in one person. And so he would get, can't get 2 death penalties, but let's say he did it bishogeg, he would have to bring 2 korban chatats. Baumine merav sheshat. Nochri haba ala behema mahu. A question asked to Rav Sheshat. If a non-Jew commits bestiality, what is the result? The non-Jew is killed. The non-Jews also are prohibited from this sin. That's for sure. The question is regarding the animal. Do we also kill the animal? If a Jew commits bestiality, we kill the animal. What about a non-Jew? Here's the question. Takala v'kalon ba'inan v'hach So it depends, what is the reason that we kill the animal when a Jew commits bestiality? The Mishnah offered two reasons. Number one, takala, because the animal caused calamity. It caused this person to sin. Now, it's not that it did it willingly. Animal doesn't have free will. It's not that it committed it knowingly, tripping him up. But still, this animal was part of the cause of the person sinning, and therefore we kill it as the cause, even though it's not that it's guilty, but it is the cause. That's reason number one. The other reason the Mishnah gave is because of shame, that if we let the animal live, it'll be walking around in the marketplace, and people will see, oh, that animal, that's the animal that person sinned with, the one who got capital punishment, and it'll bring shame to the convict. Now, even though the convict did a terrible thing and gets capital punishment, still, we don't want people to talk about such shameful things about others. And so that's the question. Do we need both reasons, that it should be the cause of calamity and will bring shame? And that's why we kill the animal in the case of a Jew who commits bestiality. But in the case of a non-Jew, well, it did cause calamity because the non-Jew also sinned and got capital punishment for it. But there is no shame. Apparently, non-Jews were not ashamed, at least back then, of committing the sin. And so we only have one of the reasons, but not the other. According to that, we would not kill the animal. Or is one reason sufficient? Even if it's just calamity, which there is here, even if there's no shame involved, then we still kill the animal. Regarding a Jew, in that case, we would kill the animal if it was a non-Jew who committed bestiality, because there is calamity, even if there is no shame, and one reason is enough. That's the question. Amar Shesha, Tinituha, Ma'ilanot she'en ochlin ve'en shotin ve'en merichin, Amra Torah, Hashchet, Serof ve'chale, ho'ilu ba'le adam takala yadan, hamat'ay et chavero midarke chayim ladarke mita, alachad kama v'chama. Rav Sheshat says, I can learn it from a baraita that says, if trees, we're talking about trees that were worshipped as idolatry. The Torah says, when you come into the land and you see these trees, you have to destroy, burn, and demolish them. Now, these trees, they didn't do anything. They didn't eat, they didn't drink, they didn't smell, they have no sensation at all. And yet the Torah says, if they were used in a sin, destroy them, because a person came to calamity because of them. So there's no fault at all to the trees. They're not minds or anything. And yet, still, it's the cause of a calamity, so you destroy them. Then all the more so if an animal comes and leads someone astray. Again, the animal's not that it has free will, but it does eat and drink and smell, and it has feelings. And so that is more deserving of capital punishment for being a cause for a person to go from a way of life to a way of death. So all the more so, yes, we should kill the animal. That's Rav Sheshat's answer. If so, that you kill an animal that causes someone to sin. What if you have a non-Jew who bows to an animal, as it treats it like a god? So that's prohibited. So should we say that the animal will also be prohibited to use and should be killed because it was involved in causing a person to kill? If you're going to say that the animal's killed in this case of bestiality with a non-Jew, then maybe also should be killed in a case of idolatry when a non-Jew bows down to it. But that can't be, because that's not the law. And mi'ika midid l'Yisrael lo asar ul nochri asar. Is there anything that is permitted to a Jew but not permitted to a non-Jew? Generally, their laws for Jews are more stringent than for non-Jews. Now, the law is that if a Jew bows down to an animal, that is not allowed. It is idolatry, and the man will be punished. But the animal does not get punished in such a case. The animal that's bowed down to cannot be used as a korban. That's true. That is one limitation. It can't be sacrificed in the Bet HaMikdash. However, you're allowed to use it. You can plow with it, and you can use its skin. You could use it for whatever you want. You just can't make it a korban. So, can it be that there's something that's not allowed, that's permitted to a Jew, but not allowed to a non-Jew. But so now we have a problem, because if you kill an animal because of bestiality with a non-Jew, then you should also kill the animal if it's involved in idolatry with a non-Jew. But that can't possibly be, because we don't kill an animal when there's idolatry with a Jew. And so we're certainly not going to kill it with idolatry for a non-Jew, so we know we wouldn't kill it. Now, we ask, Yisrael gufeli tasar midhava arabiyah. Well, why don't we kill an animal if a Jew bows down to it? Just like regarding bestiality, you kill the animal, so why not if it's involved in idolatry with a Jew? The difference is that if someone commits bestiality with an animal, then that shame is great. That's a terrible shame. If people are going to go around and saying, this animal, you know what that guy did with it? Okay, we don't want people talking about that, so that we kill it. Whereas idolatry, as bad as idolatry is, the shame involved is not as great as bestiality. So even if someone would go around and say, oh, this animal, do you know that guy who was killed for being an idolater? He bowed down to this animal. There's a little bit of shame involved, not enough that we're going to kill the animal for it. And so that's the difference for a Jew that between bestiality and idolatry, and therefore we apply that to a non-Jew also. So if we're not going to kill an animal that a Jew bows down to, we're certainly not going to kill an animal that a non-Jew bows down to. Now we ask, but what about trees, where it's not such a big shame if someone says, oh, this guy bowed down to this tree, and yet the Torah says, destroy the tree, burn it, demolish it. So over there, even though there's not a lot of shame, we destroy it. So why don't we also kill an animal and make it prohibited for use if it's bowed down to as idolatry? And the answer is, there's a difference between animals and trees, and Hashem has mercy on animals. If we have to kill the animal because it was involved in a great sin like bestiality, and it's going to bring terrible shame, then, okay, we do kill the animal. It's not that the life of animal is infinite. It's not. So we kill the animal in that case. But if the shame is a little bit, because it's just idolatry, well, in that case, if it's an animal, we have mercy on the animal. We're not going to kill the animal for any reason. Animals don't have human rights, but they do have animal rights, and so we leave it alone. Whereas a tree has no rights, so the tree, even though it will only bring a little bit of shame for people to come and say, oh, this tree, do you know that person did idolatry here and he was killed? It brings a little shame, but even a little shame is enough to kill a tree. It's not enough to kill an animal. Rava brings a different explanation for why we kill an animal that's involved in bestiality, but not an animal that's involved in idolatry. And he says, because when it comes to bestiality, the animal has enjoyment. I'm not sure if that's true, but potentially the animal might enjoy and therefore is more deserving of being killed. Whereas regarding idolatry, if some guy's bowing down to his a cow, the cow is not saying, oh, look how important I am. This person is bowing down to me, right? The cow doesn't pay any attention to it and gets no physical benefit from it. And therefore, we don't kill the animal if it's being bowed down to. We ask about this answer. What do you do with trees? Because trees they feel no benefit, no enjoyment for the fact that someone's bowing down to them like a god. And yet the Torah says, destroy them. So you see, just killing something is not dependent on it having enjoyment from it or not. And the answer is, there's a difference between trees and animals, again, as we said before. A tree, although, yes, you're right, the tree is not getting any benefit from being treated like a god, but it's only a tree, and therefore we kill it easily, even if there's just a little bit of shame, so we're going to destroy it. It was involved in a sin, so we're going to destroy it without thinking too much. Whereas if it's an animal, if the animal potentially got benefit, enjoyment, then we kill the animal. But if the animal just bowed down to and didn't get any enjoyment, then we have mercy on the animal, even though, there is some reason to say we should kill the animal, but it's not a big reason. And so we are going to be more careful in killing an animal more than just killing a tree. Now, at this point, we had the question to Rav Sheshet, and Rav Sheshet answered it in the positive. We asked if a non-Jew commits bestiality, what do we do with the animal? Is it killed? And Rav Sheshet learned from a Kal Vachomer that yes, the animal is killed. So apparently, takala, if it brings calamity, if the animal is a cause of someone to sin, then that is sufficient, even without kalon, even without shame, to kill the animal. So we have Rav Sheshet's answer that's based on a braita. Nevertheless, we're going to continue to explore this question to see if we can prove it from our Mishnah, which would be even a higher level of authority than the Baraita and a more direct proof. Tashema, davar acher, shelo tehe behema overet bashuk v'yomeru, zohi sheniskal peloni al yadaha. If remember, the Mishnah gave two reasons why we kill the animal. The first one says because a takala came from it, which seems to mean that it was the cause of someone sinning and getting capital punishment. That's one. The second reason was so that the animal, if it's alive, should not be, if the animal is alive, then it will go and be walking in the marketplace, and people will say, that's the animal that person sinned with, and because of that was stoned. And that will bring shame to his memory. So that's the second reason. Now, my lav medesefa takala vekalon, resha takala belo kalon. Now notice that even in the second reason, which is primarily about shame, it also mentions niskal peloni al yada, that because of this animal, that person got capital punishment. So in other words, it also includes the reason of a calamity. This animal, number one, it caused this other person to commit this sin. That's a calamity reason. And also people are talking about this, and that brings shame. So really, the second answer in the Mishnah includes both aspects of it. And if the second answer includes both aspects of it, that means the first answer in the Mishnah, which is also acceptable, is only calamity, because that's the word it says in the first answer, because this animal brought calamity even without shame. Now, what is a case of calamity without shame? That's a non-Jew who commits bestiality where there is calamity. This animal is the cause of this non-Jew to get capital punishment. However, there's no shame because in non-Jewish society back then, it seems that this was not a shameful thing. And so this is a proof from our Mishnah that supports Rav Sheshet. Isn't that a good proof? And we answer, no. La sefa takala vekalon resha hakamash malan dafilu kalon belo takala nami mechayevi. I agree with you in your reading of the second answer of the Mishnah that includes both, because it says this person was killed because of the animal. That is number one, mentioning the calamity, and it also brings shame because people are talking about it. So yes, that does. I agree that includes both, but the first one I can interpret to mean shame, even though it says the word takala in the first answer. But when we say calamity, what do we mean? Calamity, it's not the physical calamity, but the spiritual calamity, the social calamity, that people are talking badly about this person. And maybe that's what it means in the first answer when it says calamity. It means the shame that is involved. And so that part of the Mishnah is teaching is that shame without calamity is enough of a reason, but calamity without shame would not be enough of a reason. Now, what is the case of shame without calamity? If a Jew commits bestiality by mistake, somehow, I don't know, by mistake, he mistakes it for someone else, and since it's bishogeg, the Jew is not going to get capital punishment. But people are going to still talk about it because the animal's going to be walking by. Oh, did you hear what happened with that animal? That person? I don't know. He thought it was someone else, and he sinned. So there is shame, even though there's no calamity because the animal did not cause the person to be punished. And so this question would be relevant to such a case. If in fact you say that the first answer in the Mishnah is a case of shame without calamity, then you would kill the animal in this case, even though it didn't cause a punishment, it is still a source of shame. And this question is up to debate from the question that Rav Hamnuna asked about it. He asked this question directly. A Jew with an animal, bishogeg, what do we do? The person is not killed. he has to bring a korban, but he's not killed because he did it by mistake. But what about the animal? Takala v'kalon ba'inan v'hach kalon ika takala leka o dilma kalon afal pisha en takala. Do we say that we need both reasons to kill the animal that had calamity and shame? And here there is shame because people are talking about, don't look at this animal, what that guy did, but there's no calamity because the person didn't get capital punishment and therefore the animal is not killed? Or do we say that if you have shame, even without calamity, you do kill the animal? That's the very question that Rav Hamnuna asked. And we have an answer. Amar Rav Yosef Tashemat. Rav Yosef says, I can bring a proof from a Mishnah in Masechet Nida that teaches, Bat shalosh shanim v'yom echad mitkadeshet b'bi'ah. This teaches that if a girl is 3 years old and 1 day or more, she can do kiddushin. This is with her father. If her father arranges it, then the father can marry off his minor daughter, and it's a full marriage on a deoraita level, and the marriage can be the kiddushin can be done through bi'ah, because we saw before the act of a girl 3 years old or more is considered a legal act. Ve'im ba aleha yavam kena'ah. If her husband dies without children, then the yavam can have relations with her, do yibum, and will acquire her as a full wife. Ve'chavin aleha mishum eshet ish. Now, even though she's a minor, if during that marriage, from the first marriage or the yibum, it doesn't matter, if she commits adultery with someone, that is called adultery. Now, the girl will not be punished because she's under 13, so she's not punished. But the man will be, because it's considered that she was fully married. We don't say, oh, she's a minor, she's not really married. No, she's fully married, and you'd give capital punishment to the adulterer. In general, if a woman is nida, and a man has relations with a nida, he becomes as tameh as her, such that just like a nida who sits on anything becomes tameh, even if she sits on a cushion all the way on top and doesn't touch the bottom cushion, all the cushions below become tameh. That's the law of a nida. If a man sleeps with a nida, he becomes tameh to the same level that anything he sits on, everything below becomes tameh, all the cushions below. That's true in a regular case of two adults. It's also true regarding a minor more than 3 years old. Niset la kohen ochelet bitzruma. If there is a minor more than 3, between 3 and up, is married to a kohen, she can eat teruma even though she's a bat Yisrael, because that's one of the laws. If you're fully married, then you to a kohen, then you become part of his household, and she can eat teruma. If any 3-year-old or up has relations with someone who is pasul, like a mamzer halal, then she becomes pesula from kehuna. She cannot eat teruma. She cannot marry a kohen after that. In other words, we consider the act a full legal act, and with all the consequences that would happen to an adult. Here, these aren't punishments as such; they're just consequences of such relations. Here's the key line that we need from the Mishnah for our proof. If this minor girl, more than 3, has relations with someone she is prohibited to, any of the incest laws, relations, then the other person, the man, will be killed because of her. She is exempt because she's under 13. But because she's over 3, the act is considered a sexual act, and therefore the guy that she's prohibited to will get capital punishment. Now here's the proof. Echad mikol harayot, afilu behema, when it says anyone on the list of forbidden relations, well, on the list in Vayikra is also bestiality. So that means that we kill the animal, because it says mumatin, right? Whatever that is that committed the sin with her will be killed, even if it's an animal. And this is an exemplar of the case that we're looking for, where there is shame, but there's no calamity. There's no calamity because she gets no punishment. because she's a minor. But there is shame because people will say, this animal, do you know what happened? This animal and that girl. And so there is shame, and you do kill the animal. So here is a proof to, as an answer that Rav Yosef brings to Rav Hamnuna's question, that even if there's only shame and no calamity, we do kill the animal in such a case. However, we reject this. In fact, this girl, whatever how old she is, 8 or 10, since she did this on purpose. Now, we're not going to punish her because she's a minor, but she does know what she's doing. If she really doesn't know, then that would be shogeg indeed. But if she knows what she's doing and she knows it's prohibited and she does it anyway, then there is takala, because really she's deserving of capital punishment. Now, v'rachamanahu dechas Allah, happens to be that the Torah, Hashem, has mercy on her because she's under 13. So we're not going to punish her. We can't hold her fully responsible. However, theoretically, she really is deserving of capital punishment. So therefore, we do consider this a takala in this case, and that's why we kill the animal. Allah didachas, abehema lochas. Hashem is merciful, has pity on her, but not on the animal, and therefore, actually, this rises to the level of takala and kalon. It's actually quite an interesting conceptualization of the responsibility of a minor. It's not that a minor who does something b'mezid. If it's shogeg, same as is true for an adult. If they really don't know that this is not allowed or don't realize what they're doing, then that's shogeg. Even an adult would not get punished. But if it's a minor who knows what they're doing, because they have some knowledge of it, then it's not that the minor is not responsible as no punishment. Really, a minor actually is responsible because they know what they're doing. Now, the Torah says, listen, for you, since you're young, Hashem's going to have pity on the young person and not want to kill him. But really, they are guilty. There is guilt there, even though there's no punishment. And so therefore, this is not a good example to answer the question of Rav Hamnuna, because really there is takala and also kalon here, and that's why we kill the animal. Amar Rava, now Rava has another attempt to answer the question of Rav Hamnuna from another Mishnah in Masechet Nida, Tashema, Ben Tesha Shanim V'Yom Echad Haba Al Yevimto Kena'aham. This is similar to the previous one, but from the boy's perspective. If a boy is 9 years old or more, but even though he's still a minor, less than 13, if he performs yibum, he has relations with the yevama, that means his brother died without children, so he acquires her. Now, a minor boy, if he tries to do a marriage, kiddushin, he cannot effectuate a marriage because he doesn't have da'at, he doesn't have a mental capacity yet to take on that responsibility. However, for yibum, he does, because since his brother died and there's already a connection between him and the Yevama, so if he consummates, it creates a full marriage. And so, ve'eno noten get ad sheyagdil. Now, if they decide they want to get divorced, he cannot give a divorce until he becomes an adult, until he passes 13. Although he had enough, the point is that in order to do yibum, you don't need da'at, you don't need mental capacity, but you do need to be able to do a sexual act. And for a boy, 9 years old and up, the act is considered a legally sexual act. And that completes the yibum, even without da'at. But he can't get divorced until he gets da'at. So even if they're fighting all day long, they have to wait till he's 13 to get divorced. Now, if a 10-year-old sleeps with a nida, then that is considered full intercourse, such that the law kicks in that if she is nida, then he becomes as tameh as a nida, so that anything that he sits on, all the cushions above and below, will become tameh. This has nothing to do with marriage. Doesn't matter if they're married or not. The point is that his act is a full act. Posel ve'eno ma'achil. If he is disqualified from being a kohen and he has relations with a bat kohen, then she will not be able to eat teruma. And if he's married, this is the only one on this list where his marriage is not 100% full. If he is a kohen and he's married to a bat Yisrael, she cannot eat teruma. And the reason for this is that this aspect of the marriage has to do with his ownership, his kinyan, which does require his da'at, that he says, you are under my household, and therefore I own everything in my household, so everything in my household, including even the slaves and the animals that a kohen owns, can also eat terumah, but he has to have full knowledge in order to make that acquisition part of the marriage. So although they're fully married for all ritual matters, for this monetary aspect that terumah depends on, he is not yet able to do until he's an adult. If a 10-year-old commits bestiality, then the animal cannot be sacrificed. And the animal is killed by sikila, meaning it's considered a legally sexual act, even though he's a minor, but he's more than 9. Now, if it's convicted, then it's 2 witnesses. Again, the boy does not get a punishment because he's a minor, but the animal does sikila. Now, why do you have to say that it can't be sacrificed if you're going to stone it? We're talking about a case where, let's say, there's not full proof. There's only 1 witness, so not enough to stone it, but that would be enough to make the animal prohibited from being used as a sacrifice on the altar. And here's the key line. If this 10-year-old, 11-year-old would commit a sexual act with any of the prohibited relationships that are mentioned in the Torah, then the other person, the adult, will be killed because of that. Again, because he has the ability to do a full legally recognized sexual act. Now, within the list of arayot is not only the people that a person is prohibited to, but also bestiality. And in such a case, there is shame, but there is no calamity. There's no calamity because this boy is not killed. So there's no punishment for the boy, and therefore you can't say there's calamity that the animal caused, but there is shame that people will say, oh, this animal, don't you know what happened? Right? It had committed the sin with that boy. So there is shame, and yet it says we kill it. So isn't this a good proof, an answer to Rav Hamnuna's question that even if there's shame, only shame, but not calamity, we still do kill the animal? And the answer is no, this is not a good proof. Since it's true, he's a boy and doesn't get punishment, but if he did it intentionally, then that is called calamity. He really is deserving. He's guilty and deserving of punishment. The Torah says, Hashem says, we're going to have pity on the boy and we won't give him. But really he's guilty enough that he deserves it. So actually it is called takala. And so although Hashem has pity on the boy, it does not have to have pity on the animal. And therefore the animal did cause calamity in this case, even though because of a technicality, because of pity, we don't kill the boy. Nevertheless, the animal has both. It is involved here, both calamity and pity. Tashema, last attempt at a resolution. Davar acher, shelo teheh behema ovedet bashuk v'yomeru, zoi sheniska peloni al yada. Maila b'desefat hakala v'kalon, resha kalon belo takana, v'echidam Yisrael ba'ala behema b'shogeg. In our Mishnah, that it gives the second reason why we kill an animal involved in bestiality is that so that it won't be walking in the marketplace and people will say, this is the animal that person sinned with and was stoned because of it. Now, that includes both reasons. That includes takala and kalon. And that's the second reason mentioned in the Mishnah. So the first reason in the Mishnah must be different. And must be the first reason is shame without calamity. And again, as we said before, although the first reason in the Mishnah says the word takala, you can interpret takala to mean the calamity of the shame that people are going to be talking about. And what is a case of shame without calamity? That would be a Jew who commits bestiality, beshogeg, where he's not punished because beshogeg, but there is shame, and yet we would kill him. So isn't this an answer to Rav Hamnuna's question and say, and yes, in fact, we do kill such an animal when there's only shame? And we answer, no, lo sefa takala vekalon, resha takala belo kalon. You can also read the Mishnah in a different way. This is how we read it all the way back when we first brought this as a proof for Rav Sheshat. And so this can mean that the sefa is takala v'kalon, as we said, but the resha, when it says takala, literally says takala, and it's referring to a case where there is calamity, but not shame. V'hechidami, what would be a case like that? Nochriya ba'ala behema, uchdeba'u mineh Rav Sheshat. And that would be a case of a non-Jew who commits bestiality, where there is a calamity, he's killed, but there is no shame, and that will bring us back to the question that was asked of Rav Sheshet. So in sum, we don't have a definite answer, but the point is this Mishnah could be read as our Mishnah is ambiguous, can be read this way or that way. If you read it this way, it will be an answer to one of the questions. If you answer it the other way, it can be an answer to the other one of the questions. But you can interpret the Mishnah one way or another, and so neither question can be answered with full resolution. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen v'amen.